It's Tuesday, and we've got I think the choir is coming in after we finish. Tuesday is their rehearsal night, so if you want to hear some good music, if you want to stay somewhere at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, you stay. But Phil's got to get back to Nashville, and he's got a very important surgery on tomorrow, so before he leaves, those of you that would like to join us before we dismiss, we're just going to pray for him and know that everything is going to be all right. Amen. So let's join in, if you will, if you may. Welcome those that are online. We're streaming live tonight for this partnership, and let's just offer a word of prayer as we come into His house of worship to learn and to grow and to develop and to learn more about this disease that has plagued our community for so long. So, Father, we thank you. We're grateful tonight. We pray that our understanding is ready to receive, our hearts and our minds. Father, we pray tonight that you will speak through us. Bless those who are coming before us to give us this vital information that we need to help navigate and to manage, in many cases, our families, our personal situations, or maybe friends or loved ones that we may be acquainted with and know that they're facing these type of challenges. So tonight we give it in your hands. We thank you for openness of heart and mind. It is in Jesus' name that we give thanks. Amen. Welcome. There's some information back that Christy is going to give you some information about. And we just want to learn tonight. So Christy Wick is from UT, and it's a lot of other people here that I don't know. I only know Christy, and I just met Phil. And so I appreciate all of you coming tonight to learn more about Alzheimer's and dementia. This disease has gone so long undiagnosed, and in some cases not diagnosed correctly, maybe, And so we're learning more about this. There are so many resources here on tonight that we want you to take advantage of. I want you to know that this is the first of several collaborations that Rosemark is doing with community alliances and agencies across the community to help us navigate through this health system. So take out your pens and paper. If you are connecting with someone that needs to follow us online, it's www.rosemarkministries.org. www.rosemarkministries.org. If you want to go to YouTube, we're live on our YouTube channel. If they just put in Rosemark, they'll see the live YouTube face come right up, okay? Thank you all so very much. Christy?
Thank you, Pastor Smith, for having us. We are absolutely thrilled to be here. We have a team of people here tonight that I was hoping to introduce you to. And in just a second, we'll pass out some folders that will have lots of information for you, as well as a copy of all the slides that you'll be seeing. So you'll be able to see those and jot down some notes if you like, but the bulk of the information will be there in your handouts. We are grateful to have the opportunity to bring experts from across the country, but also just right here across the state of Tennessee. The first person that I'd like to introduce is Phil Martin, who is the Director of Honoring Choices Tennessee. We're going to talk about several really important topics tonight, and we're going to give Phil the opportunity to get us started, and then we'll kind of cycle back, and we're going to talk about why we're here. And also Deja Wilson is here from the Alzheimer's Association. She's going to give a great presentation on everything dementia related, including resources and how to get your questions answered and help. And then we'll talk about a couple other programs that we have and places that you can get resources if you are an older adult or if you're caring for an older adult. In the back, the Alzheimer's Association has set up a table, as well as the Area Agency on Aging. Ms. Kim Daughtry is here. She's able to answer questions as well. And then we also have Laura Brown with the Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services. And she's got some helpful information as well for those of you or someone you might know that needs some legal advice but has difficulty hiring an attorney. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started with Phil. and let him tell us everything we need to know.
I may be dangerous with this in my hand, so, but thank you, Christy, and thank you, Pastor Smith. It's such a great opportunity. We're out of Nashville, and we have been crisscrossing the state, and so it's a great opportunity to get out and come down and spend the evening with you guys. I had to pull out my winter coat tonight. You guys probably had to also. But the subject I'm going to talk about, most of you have probably heard about the subject. And I'm going to start by asking you a question. Show of hands, who knows what an advance directive is? Several hands. Okay. How many of you have an advance directive? So not too many people. I've been going to a lot of doctors over the last 6 or 8 months, and every time I go to the doctor, every time I check into a hospital, they ask me, do you have an advance directive? And back several years ago, my late wife and I paid a lawyer a handsome amount of money to draw us up an advance directive. And then a couple of years ago, the Commissioner of Health in Tennessee said, we've got a low number of people in this state that have an advance directive, and everybody needs an advance directive. I'm going early in this presentation on dementia, and there's, in addition to the fact that I got to get back for a surgery tomorrow, if you're facing and giving care to somebody with dementia, you need to address this subject early. It's one of those early onset dementia items, and it ought to be on your checklist. So Christy's got some slides that I brought with me, and if you refer to the slides on the TV screen, I'm just going to give Pastor the high sign every time I want him to change it. I'm going to move through here pretty quickly. And that's a lot smaller on the screen than it was on my computer screen. But an advance directive is a document that speaks for you when you can't speak for yourself. And it tells a doctor, it tells a hospital, it tells the world how much care you want when you get to that point in your life where you can't communicate for yourself. And in Tennessee, an advance directive has 2 parts. One part is health care power of attorney. And that means you can give somebody you love, or don't love, I guess, you could give somebody the responsibility to make decisions for you when you can't make decisions for yourself. So that's the first part of an advance directive. The second part is what we used to call a living will, which says, I want, in these types of cases, I want this kind of care. And you can specify as much or as little care as you want to specify. So I would highly recommend that you at least take a look at our website. So I'm gonna go through these slides. Without an advance directive, providers, doctors take an oath to give you, to keep you alive with any measure possible. I mean, that's sort of the way they are trained, and we're blessed in this country to have a great healthcare system, but an advance directive gives the patient a voice, and the patient needs a voice all the way to the end. And no matter what situation they're in, without an advance directive, doctors and hospitals and nursing homes will give you endless amounts of care, regardless of the consequences, regardless of how poor your quality of life is, regardless of the cost, regardless of the burden on your family. And you just think about that and you begin to realize it's nice to have a voice, and that's really all an advance directive is. Studies have found that most people would rather spend the end of their life at home with the people they love, but in a lot of cases that doesn't happen. And studies have shown, particularly when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, that those patients get a whole lot more care than they really want, and it's sometimes not very pretty. And talk to your doctor about it because doctors will be straight with you. They'll tell you, you know, I'm going to give you all the care that I can give you as long as I can give you care. But doctors also will tell you that they want to hear your voice, and this is a chance for them to hear your voice. And as I mentioned, a few years ago, the Commissioner of Health in Tennessee took a look at the number of people in this state that have advanced directives, and he said to a group of about 13 not-for-profits and healthcare organizations across the state, this is not something that government needs to do. This is something that the private sector needs to do. They need to go out and make sure that Tennesseans realize how easy it is to have an advance directive. And so that group that he called together now is over 30 organizations. We're statewide. If you'll flip the chart there, you'll see some logos there that you may recognize. And some of them you will hear from tonight as well. So we're out there, and this is our cause. We're trying to make sure people understand how easy it is. And a few years ago, the state of Tennessee took some pretty good steps to make our advance directive user-friendly. And when I checked into the nursing home, I wound up in a nursing home this summer because of one of my issues. This lady rushed in the room with this stack of papers and said, "Here, you need to sign this DNR." Well, if you've ever hung around doctors and medical offices, you know that stands for do not resuscitate. And I said, no, I have an advance directive. And so Tennessee has made it really easy. We actually, and I have forms, we have forms back in the back at the table that you can pick up. We've gotten it down to one page. And if you're like me, you'll have to use your glasses because the type is small. There are a lot of words on this page, but you can see it's not that tedious to fill out. So I filled it out and had 2 witnesses. I didn't need a lawyer, didn't need a notary public. Cost me absolutely nothing. You can download it from our website, and it gives you the 4 steps to take, and in 15 minutes you can have an advance directive. Now, I did mine in 15 minutes because I had a little bit of education on the subject, and the lady waving the DNR in front of me, I said, no, let me make sure that you have a copy of my advance directive. So I'd encourage you all to take a look at our website. Next slide, please. And the purpose of our group, again, is to encourage Tennesseans to discuss healthcare decisions with their family, to document their choices and enjoy a greater quality of life and harmony with their family at the end of their life. Advanced care planning with those for those people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, and the caregivers and the family members. There are several things that make dementia unique, and it's more important that those patients make their wishes for treatment known, that they empower their family members to provide, and they provide for them a map of care, which this advanced directive will do. And the challenges are great, but if you address the subject early, it's something that many people take great comfort in. We are working right now with Dr. Gloria Thomas Anderson. I'm sort of the expert on Tennessee and Tennessee's requirements for advanced directives. Dr. Anderson is probably the foremost authority in taking this message to people of color in this country, and she's amazing. Her group is called Heart Tones, and she is a part of our group, and so we're working together with her, and we can bring a workshop to your church, and we can train your congregation members to, first of all, we'll take them through the 4 steps, and they'll have their own advanced directive, which in my case was a $300 value the first time I did it. But it's absolutely no cost, and it can be done very painlessly, and we've got the tools to make that happen, and they're yours at no cost thanks to this grant. And we want to get out there. We have affiliates all across the state that can come and do this. Dr. Anderson and I are about to do an hour-long video that's just soup to nuts, and so I would ask you to. All you have to do is get in touch with us, and that's awful small on the screen. But what it says is it's got our website address, it's got my email, it's got my direct phone number, and back there on the table as you go out, there are little flash drives, little thumb drives on the table, and it has this presentation on it, so you can just scroll through it and get to my information, and we'd love to hear from you. And it's absolutely no cost, and we would love to make an appointment with you to either do virtually or we can do it in person. Come and help educate your congregation on how to make this happen, and it'll make lives easier. So Christy's moving. I'm going to just close by saying, Laura Brown, raise your hand, please. She's going to speak to you later on. She is the fiscal agent for our group, so she's my boss basically. But she does a broader range of legal topics. She's going to talk to you a little bit about that later on, and she can offer some services on that front. And it fits in very nicely with Dr. Anderson and her passion. She's an author. She's a physician, and her heart is really into this, and she can bring it home like nobody else. So I would say to you, please give us a call. And now I'm going to turn it back to Christy and say thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Phil. Wait. Well, okay, you're good. Pastor, would you like to offer a prayer before Phil gets on the road, or I'm happy to do it if you're okay with that too? Okay. If y'all could bow your heads, please. Father God, thank you so much for this opportunity to be in this place, again, to worship you, but Lord, to learn how to serve others better in the way that Jesus would have. God, we just pray God's hand of protection over Phil and Hutch as they drive back home to Nashville, but also as he goes through this procedure tomorrow, Lord. It's been a long year. We're praying for healing and for safety. And Lord, just be with him and let him feel your presence. In your name we pray. Amen. You're welcome. Well, we are, I think, Marissa, we can not do the video, but go to just that next slide, which I think is like number 3. So I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit more formally. My name is Christy Wick. I am a nurse practitioner by trade. I work at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga School of Nursing. I started out as a nurse practitioner taking care of older adults at Alexian Pace, which is all-inclusive care for the elderly. And one of the main questions I get when I start these talks is, well, what are you saying is old? Like, how old is old? And really, it's how we feel. It's how our function is, what we're able to do with our activities in life. And so my goal is for everyone to live as long as they possibly can, as healthy as they possibly can, and enjoy life as much as they possibly can. But we know that there are some struggles that we have, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of our parents or our aunts, uncles, friends, families, congregation members, church leaders. Many of our leaders are aging in our churches. Many of our volunteers in our churches are aging. And so those people that have served and dedicated their lives and commitment to service are now needing help as well. And so one of our goals through our, you can switch for me, through this grant is to work with faith and religious communities across the state of Tennessee just to help bring this information to you. Because COVID was rough, Alzheimer's disease is rough, surgeries are rough, nursing homes are rough. We want to make this, knowledge is power. And a mentor told me a long time ago that sometimes people just need a plan. And you need the knowledge to be able to think through a plan. We sat through a conference in Knoxville this morning, the very beginning of it. There was a pastor talking about communities of color and the need to get this information out because leaders and pastors and volunteers just want to be able to serve and help. And so that's part of our job, is extending that to you. I am not an expert on anything. I am not a pastor. I do have a very strong heart for older adults. Most of us in this field have some sort of story, right? And my story is that my grandmother lived with dementia for 13 years, and my grandfather took care of her. The last 4 years, they never left their home, ever, not to go out one time. And so knowing how difficult that is to be a caregiver, but also for us as a family to take care and serve my grandfather, not to mention my grandmother, was very, very difficult. And they lived in a rural part of Tennessee, so there weren't a lot of resources. But we worked very hard to bring everything to their home. It was back before, right when iPads came out, and I tell the quick story that we gave him an iPad, and my aunts and uncles said he will never use it, but he had music on it and games and the stock market, and that was it. And by the time my grandmother passed, they were already on like the 4th iPad, but he never would let us update it. So he had it that long, and it was just that little piece, something that we could give him that he could be tapped into the outside. So sometimes it's things that we just don't think about that really do help and provide some of that comfort or break from that caregiving job that's so hard. In the state of Tennessee, we know that across all faiths and religions, at least 51% report worshiping somewhere during the course of a month. Over 85% of us report that religion is important in our quality of life and in the decisions we make in life. And from a public health perspective, we know that if we can come to you versus expecting all of you to find us, then that helps a little bit. It helps us spread the word, it helps you serve others better, and it helps you be served better, right? Next slide. Churches, again, during COVID, but also during natural disasters. We had a huge tornado in Chattanooga 2 Easter Sundays ago. Churches are trained and ready to serve. They're an infrastructure that's already present in the community. They're places of trust. We trust our leaders. Our leaders have a commitment to us as congregants. And so, again, that's just, you may be wondering, well, why us? Why here? Why now? And this is why. Because we know that this is a special place for you, and it's a place where during times that are hard that you reach out to for support, I hope. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit more. We've already mentioned our core partners, so I'm not going to stay on this long. Again, in your folders, you have all the copies of the slides. You also have some other resources along with our programs, which we can talk about later. But we are trying really to connect, since I'm not the expert in everything, with the people that are. Next slide. Okay. And we'll talk about our programs after. And so I think we can introduce Deja at this point, one of our experts. So Deja comes to us from the Alzheimer's Association. She is the diversity coordinator for your area. You're serving the state? Yeah, so she serves the whole state, but you live here in Memphis. And so Deja has been fantastic in the short time that I've known her. Very well versed in Alzheimer's and dementia. When she's finished, we'll have some time for discussion. So feel free to come and go to ask her questions, but we will also really kind of dig into your questions as well. Oh, do you want me to?
No, it's okay. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Deja Wilson. I am the diversity coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association, the Tennessee region. One thing, first off, let me say thank you everyone for coming out this evening. Like Pastor said, y'all have just gotten off of work and coming out. We really appreciate your time coming out to do this with us today. And then one thing that Christy said is that everyone has a story. And my story for starting in Alzheimer's and dementia was that it was never planned. I didn't have a personal connection. I've always loved people, elderly people in particular. I love all people, but elderly people and children have always had a special place in my heart. So I went and worked at an assisted living facility, and from that day forward, I was hooked. I worked in the memory care unit, and that was back almost 10 years ago. So I'm in the field because I truly do have a passion for the people and learning about the disease and thinking about when I grew up as a little girl. I didn't hear about Alzheimer's or dementia. I heard a lot about diabetes and high blood pressure and cancer, but we didn't talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. So the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to educate all people, but definitely those in the African American community, because we truly don't know or don't talk about the disease as much as we should. So that's my spiel there, and I'll go into the presentation. Better Together. The name came from, much like Christy said, us wanting to come into the churches and kind of help with the education part, wanting to be able to provide that, to come in. You know, we're all in this together. We can't do what we do without you all. So better together, better to have you all working with us than us trying to navigate and do things without you all. So that's just the title. We can go to the next slide. At the Alzheimer's Association, our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease and all other dementias. And how we plan to do that is by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and by providing quality care and support. So a brief overview of what I'm going to go over. We'll do a fact check. We'll go over the facts and figures, understanding Alzheimer's and dementia, the stages of Alzheimer's. How would I know, giving you the 10 early signs, risk, beautiful brain, some tips on how to love your brain or risk reduction, and then resources that we do provide. So here, this is our facts and figures. On here, it kind of gives you a breakdown of things. I'm sorry. I'm looking there, but I'm looking here too, so that's all I'm doing. On there, I have a next slide that'll kind of break it down for you, but one thing that I want to point out on here that's not on the other one is that in 2020 and 2021, Deaths from heart disease decreased 7.3%, while deaths from Alzheimer's disease actually increased 145%. So that's, yeah, that's more than too much to say. Which is one reason why it's very important for us to be aware of the disease. That way we know how to go about handling it and caring for those people that we know that live with the disease. If we go to the next slide. So here, disease impact. 6.5 million people nationally live with Alzheimer's disease. I'm gonna grab my binder because like currently 11 million caregivers nationally. Now, 120,000 Tennesseans live with the disease. So right here in Tennessee, we currently have 120,000 people who live with Alzheimer's disease. We also have 365,000 caregivers in the state of Tennessee. So the disease is making a big impact nationally, but even on a local level here, right in Tennessee, the numbers are pretty high for both those with the disease as well as the caregivers family caregivers who are taking care of their loved ones living with the disease. Women represent 2/3 of all people living with Alzheimer's disease. And then the disease now kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. So the impact is pretty high, which is one of the reasons why, again, knowing about it and not brushing it under the rug, bringing it out from the shadows and talking about it allows for families to get those resources that they need, and then allows for us to learn more about the disease and what we can do to bring that impact of the disease down. Understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. So real quick, I'm just gonna give a scenario, and we can all be honest, and you can lift your hand a little bit if you've experienced it, and we'll talk about it. So it's Wednesday night, and you're at home, and you're watching your favorite show. And you're like, when this goes on commercial, I'm gonna go in there and get me some popcorn, and I'm gonna come back, because it's your show, so you're not gonna leave until the commercial comes on. The commercial comes on, you go into the kitchen, and you're like, now what did I come in here for? Like, I'm in here for something, like, what? And you're like, what is it? Like, I came in here for a reason. Anybody have those moments? Okay, good. No need to fear. It's not dementia. Because for us, what we do is once we get back to the couch, you're like, okay, let me go back, because I know I came in here for something. You go back, and as soon as you get ready to sit down, boom, my popcorn. So you get up and go back and get your popcorn. Whereas someone living with dementia would have gone into the kitchen, and a thought of, I'm getting popcorn, would have never came back into their minds. Being able to retrace their steps on, let me go back because I know I came in here for something, that never clicks. So just wanted to give everybody a little, it's just forgetfulness. You're welcome. It's just forgetfulness. That's not dementia. Next slide. Now, what is dementia? One of the questions that I get very often is, well, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So dementia is an umbrella term for loss of memory and other thinking abilities severe enough to interfere with daily life. So dementia is more of an umbrella term, and there are like hundreds of different dementias, whereas Alzheimer's disease is a cause of dementia, and it's the most common cause of dementia, as 60 to 80% of all dementia cases lead to being diagnosed as Alzheimer's disease. That's one of the greatest questions that I know I always get asked, so I wanted to make sure to cover that, because people there is like, well, what's the deal? Well, how do I know if I got Alzheimer's or dementia? They're not necessarily in contrast. Alzheimer's is a cause of dementia. Next slide. So the stages of Alzheimer's disease. Let me see how it's gonna pop. Okay, minus the sign that's there, y'all. It didn't look like this on the computer screen, I promise. I think it just happens like when you transfer the files over. But the early stages of Alzheimer's disease is called the mild Alzheimer's. And note too, all the stages that I list, some of the symptoms can overlap. So there could be symptoms from one stage and another stage. They can overlap. The symptoms can overlap. But In the mild stage, people are typically still kind of pretty independent, so they do a lot of their daily tasks on their own. However, they could have memory lapse, difficulty concentrating, confusion with performing daily tasks, trouble. It's okay, I got all this. Okay. Okay, good. And y'all do have this handout in your folders too, so, okay. But trouble remembering new information. So a lot of times in the earlier stage, they can remember, that's why a lot of times when you see people progress, they'll, as I see, because I come from a care side, a lot of them will say, well, mama, when it's their daughter. Because they'll hold on to the fact of, okay, she's a female, her face is familiar, must be my mama, rather than thinking it's my daughter. It's kind of the newer information that's harder to remember. And the moderate, you have confusion with words. One that I've seen personally as a person will say, well, give me that thing that I need the thing that I sit on. I need the thing that I sit on, rather than saying, I need a chair. So the confusion with words. Personality and behavioral changes, difficulty remembering events or personal history, and changes in sleep pattern. Who remembers when they had newborn babies? Okay, many times, those living with the disease revert back to that stage and saying they'll be up all night. I have seen some walk all night. They'll walk all night, and then they'll sleep during the day, much like a newborn baby. It kind of goes back, the cycle kind of goes back to where they're sleeping in the day and they're walking all night. So that's one of the changes in the sleep patterns. And then the severe requires around-the-clock assistance, unable to communicate, changes in physical abilities, and unaware of recent experiences. Unfortunately, at this stage of the disease, sometimes it seems like a person is just there. Very, very hard stage for loved ones, and definitely, of course, the person, even though they can't express it, you know, it must be pretty hard for them too, just being there and not being able to express how I feel or what I'm feeling or what I need. So very hard stage of just the disease in general, but very severe stage there. Next slide. So what should I look for? The 10 early signs. Memory loss that disrupts your daily life. So doing things that you normally do on a daily basis, that's nothing. A big thing that I've saw happen is driving. I'm gonna give a quick story. I had a lady at a facility when I worked at one that had an IL and an AL, so she was still driving. And this one particular day, she always went to the hair salon on Tuesdays. This one particular day, she went that morning, and when she got back, 2 guys were walking her back to the facility. Now, we didn't necessarily check her because she was in independent living. But when the 2 guys brought her back, she had gotten lost. And she happened to find this house, and we were all like, you know, thank God that they were people who were good people, because they could have been a very bad situation, complete strangers bringing her back, and then there were 2 men, and she was a little lady. So it was a lot with that. But that was the first experience that we had for her even being diagnosed, because before she was not diagnosed with it, which is why she was able to live on the independent living side. So changes that disrupt your daily life, challenges in planning or solving problems. This happens a lot, definitely, like financially, paying bills, handling the checkbooks. You see those things kind of become very challenging for those living with the disease. Difficulty completing familiar tasks, again, much like disrupting your daily life, even down to the point of grooming. You may see unnormal grooming habits. You know, they're normally very clean and very put together, and now you're starting to see them and they're not. That would definitely be something to check into, to look deeper into. Confusion with time or place. Definitely dates, seasons, months, those things kind of no longer line up. They don't know, sometimes they don't even know where they are per se. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. One thing with that, a big part of that is color and distance. At a facility that I worked at, we had to have color plates. So the plates were red while the tablecloths were a tan color. That way everyone could identify their plate and their vision, having that red plate helped them to better identify their food rather than them going to the forks with the table, which I've seen happen before. And then distance, there may be a step there, but they don't see that step. So rather than stepping down for a step, they're just walking normal, which leads to a fall, which goes into a bigger problem. New problems with words and speaking or writing, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps, much like our example. And during these signs, a lot of times they will accuse people of stealing their things because they've misplaced them. I see a lot of people nodding their heads, so you've experienced that. Someone's stealing my stuff, when really I've put it somewhere and I don't know where I put it. Somebody must have stolen it, because I know where I put it, but I don't know where I put it, if that makes sense. Decreased or poor judgment. Again, a lot of times that comes with either financial or hygiene. Withdrawal from work or social activities. This happens a lot, especially with the early stage, when a person is aware that they have the disease. When they're aware that they've been diagnosed, they'll kind of withdraw from their normal crowd of friends because they don't want to embarrass themselves. Maybe they can't carry a conversation, and like I said, they're aware that they can't, so instead of going and embarrassing myself, I just won't go. So they'll kind of withdraw, pull back from people that they would normally hang out, or even activities that they would normally do. And then changes in mood and personality. Some people that they're like, well, you know, she was the sweetest person, and they can get very, very mean. So those are some of the earlier signs. If you experience this, again, this disease is nothing to be ashamed of. If you experience any of these, talk to someone that you can trust. If you're someone that you know experiences this, if you're not the person that you feel will be the best person to go and talk to that person about it, find the person that you feel like they would take it the best from, kind of start that conversation, and then go from there with setting up, you know, doctor's appointments just to get testing done. Next slide. Risk factors. So the greatest known risk is age. That's been one of the greatest things. However, it is not a senior disease. There are currently 200,000 people who live with early onset. So it's not considered a senior disease, and it's also not a normal part of aging. So it's not something that you should say, oh, well, I know when I get old, I'm going to have to get Alzheimer's. Like, no, it's not normal. We should not expect to get it, nor is it a senior disease, because people now with the early onset have gotten it as early as in their 40s. So it's a disease for everyone to be concerned about, not just for grandma or just for great-grandma, but all of us as a whole. Family history. That can be due to shared genetics, environmental, and lifestyle factors. So different things that may have occurred when you were growing up, different things that went on in your household or in your community could could give you a greater risk to the disease. And then it increases if more than one family member has the disease. So if your mom had it and then your brother had it, or your sister, you know, 2 family members have had it, that could definitely increase your risk there. Genetics, there are 2 genes that could possibly lead to risk. The risk gene will tell you you're at risk of getting it. You have a higher risk of getting it. It's not a guarantee that you will get it. However, the deterministic gene does determine that you will get the disease. And when you go to your doctor for testing, they're able to do genetic testing and see if you have either of those genes. And then ethnicity, race, and sex. Hispanics are 1.5 times more likely to get the disease than our white counterparts. African Americans and blacks are 2 times more likely to get the disease than our white counterparts. And then women are more likely to develop the disease than men. So those are just the risk factors there, things to consider with thinking about it. And although those are the things that we cannot change, there are some things that we can do to lower our risk of getting the disease. So, 10 ways to love your brain. One is follow your heart. One thing that we have found through research is that a lot of those heart disease like hypertension, diabetes, obesity, those things that affect your disease, those diseases could also give you a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. So take care of those underlying diseases. Take care of your heart, because what's good for your heart is good for your brain. Fuel up right. Now, I'm gonna let y'all know I'm guilty here, okay? Because I am a soul food girl, okay? I love all of it, and I like for it to be real good and juicy. I don't really think there's no time that I ever say, ooh, I want a salad. I don't have that feeling, but I'm gonna work on that. I'm gonna work on that, and I'm gonna encourage all of you to work on that as well, because as the saying says, we are what we eat. So it does encourage that we eat those leafy green vegetables, fatty fish like salmon, berries, you guys. Blueberries are at the top of the list. Everybody like blueberries? Okay, well, everybody eat some blueberries, put some in a smoothie. If you don't like them that much, just take them real quick, chew it up. Just eat you a little bit every day, because blueberries are the top berries, but any berry is very good with that. Then break a sweat. That's me again. That's me again, y'all, listen. But I'm gonna get in that gym, and we can do this together and just do a little workout. But we don't have to go to the gym. Even a 20-minute chair exercise, cardio, swimming, just getting active, getting your body pumping, getting your brain pumping. You know, these are all things that we can do to lower our risk. Catch some Z's. We have to get our rest. We're all busy, and it's like, I don't have time for 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I just don't get it. We got to make the time, y'all. We've got to make the time so that, again, we can lower our risk, because our brains need that time when we rest. Our brains need that time. So get your sleep. Butt out. I'm not judging anybody, but one recommendation is to stop smoking. Smoking, put down the cigarettes. That's what the butt out is. Now, this is just a recommendation. Now, this didn't come from me, but I do, there is a good recommendation, is to stop smoking. Take care of your mental health. That's another thing that in the African American community particularly, it has a stigma. You know, we don't go to no therapist. You don't go do that. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's make sure that our mental health is together, because if your mind ain't right, nothing's going to be right. So pray and go talk to somebody. Let's combine the two. And then heads up, again, that's feeding your brain, taking some time to do brain exercises or trivia games. That's one thing that we do also in the assisted living facilities, is we have a lot of trivia games, because it does keep their minds thinking. It keeps you going, kind of like the skill. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. Kind of the same with those brain skills. So wanting to kind of make sure that you're constantly working it, work your brain. Buddy up. Get you somebody. We're gonna do this thing together. Talk to someone. If you're experiencing signs of the disease, talk to someone. Again, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Find someone that you can trust. Talk to them about what you're going through, and we're gonna do this together. Yeah, because I'm gonna need y'all with the food and the exercise. Stomp yourself. That goes back to, again, doing the working out. And then hit the books, reading, taking in that knowledge, constantly feeding your brain. It does recommend going back to school, even if it's online. But if that's not something that's in the cards for you, just taking time to read on your own. Simple books, just keeping your brain going is basically what it's saying. Constantly feed your brain. Next slide. Key to remember, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Treatment options. So currently there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease. However, if someone is to be diagnosed, your medical physician can prescribe FDA-approved drugs that can treat the symptoms associated with the disease. Drug-less treatment. If you know someone who does have a diagnosis, these are some things that you can do without having to be a healthcare professional. Focus on their personal comfort. If you're caring for someone, especially those people that are bedridden or wheelchair bound, making sure that they're comfortable when they're sitting, making sure they're comfortable when they're lying, even if they're not in a wheelchair in bed. If you're somewhere and it's cold, they may not express that they're cold, but if you see them kind of tugging, watching for those nonverbal social cues and making sure that that person is comfortable. Don't argue the facts. This is probably one of my favorite points that I always try to tell people, because one thing that I had to learn with working in the field is many times it's not them, it's the people caring for them who has to learn a new way. Because arguing with, if I say it's Monday and you say no, it's Wednesday, that's going to be a problem for me because I know it's Monday. So instead of arguing with me that it's Monday, if it's not going to hurt that person that you're caring for to think that it's Monday, let it be Monday, okay? Learning to go into their reality is very important with people who have Alzheimer's disease and other dementias as well. Just going into their reality, making sure that they're safe and comfortable is our biggest priority. Not arguing the facts, not being the one that's right, not trying to make them say what you, just go into their reality, make sure they're safe, make sure they're comfortable. I put up the wrong finger, sorry. Create calm environments. One thing that people with Alzheimer's disease, sometimes if it's very noisy, that can get a negative behavior or a negative reaction from people. So if you notice that you're in a noisy space and there's a lot going on, and that person that you're caring for is just not doing well, take them to a quieter location. Kind of get them away from the noisy aspect and allow them to calm down and allow some of that stimulation to go down. Allow times for rest. Again, in between gatherings or in between events, giving them time to kind of, regroup, get themselves together, rather than going place to place to place. Because whereas we can handle it because we're fine, sometimes that's overstimulation for them. And then redirect one's attention, respond to the emotion, not the behavior. Again, kind of going into their reality, making sure that they're comfortable, rather than if mom is having a meltdown because it's loud, rather than saying, well, mama, it's okay, there's nothing wrong. There is something wrong. There may not be anything wrong on our end. We don't see anything wrong, but for her, there's something wrong. So rather than responding to the fact of she's having a breakdown, respond to her emotions, allow her to know, okay, mom, I understand, let me see what I can do to help you right now, rather than arguing how she should or should not be behaving. Next. And then how we at the Alzheimer's Association can help. So we do have a 24/7 helpline, our number there, and all this information is in your folders, but we do have a 24/7 helpline. It's available around the clock, 365 days a year. The people that answer the phone line are master's level clinicians, so when you have those questions that go a little deeper in depth, or if my brother had it and then my uncle had it, am I likely to get those type of questions, they can answer, as well as general questions as well. But they are 24/7 help, whereas me, I'm in Memphis, but I'm not available 24/7. So they would be a great go-to for that. We also offer free education. You can find that at alz.org, which is our site, which again, all this is in your folder. We also have our AARP Community Resource Finder. What this does is when you go online, it will actually give you resources that are local, right here in Memphis, Millington, local areas where you can go and get support. Next slide. And then we have virtual programs. We transitioned to virtual once COVID hit, and we do still offer those programs now. So if you're someone who still doesn't too much, get out from home, we still have virtual options as well that you can take advantage of. And then we also have our trial match. One thing that is very, very important, especially for us as African-American people, is to go and get some of those studies done so that numbers can be accurate, so they can know how badly we are, how much we are impacted by the disease, but also they can start to figure out some of the whys. But they can't do that if we don't go and get the test done. So trial match is, again, one of those options that we have to where you can go, and it'll show you some local areas where you can go and get some of those things done, clinical studies done. Thank you.
Wasn't she fantastic? All right, I'm gonna give you, yeah, she was great. I just wanted to point out a couple of the handouts that you all have, and then we'll open up for some questions. One is, there's a colorful handout at the back called Understanding Different Types of Dementia. And it goes through some of those things that Deja mentioned, as well as has some other information on it that may be helpful if you're wanting more information right away. The second colorful handout has the next steps after diagnosis. And this has a lot of those same resources that Deja was talking about as well. It's front and back. And it also covers things like legal support, considering the clinical trial. And by the way, clinical trials aren't always you taking a medicine or having a test done. There are a lot of trials that are out there now that are things like, does a caregiver app help you? Does journaling help you? So there are all sorts of things that we can all participate in that aren't necessarily that old school, take a drug or a shot or something like that. Those trials are important, but there are lots of things that you can kind of dip your fingers or toes in. There's a particular app that's called Care Virtue that works kind of like social media, but it's just for your family and your core group of caregivers. It's sponsored by the National Institute of Health, so that's an example. They have some trials going on because they're getting funding up and running to try and help caregivers. Caregivers are one thing we didn't talk a whole lot about tonight, and our time is limited, and our goal is to be able to be here and offer more programs over the next year or so that we can continue to introduce you to people that are here always. Deja is one of those people. The AAAD, the Area Agency on Aging, has been here forever. They have tons of resources for caregivers, Meals on Wheels, my mind just went blank. Transportation sometimes, shopping sometimes, but more than anything, they have a phone number that you can call to get information and assistance. And if it's not a service that they offer, they can help you find the resource that does offer it. So our goal is to get you, to help you meet these people and form relationships so that you know where to go for that help when I'm back in Chattanooga taking care of my boys. So, let's see, other notes. Our biggest thing is stamping out this stigma and this fear. We all, myself included, probably have a healthy fear of being diagnosed with dementia or taking care of parents with dementia while I have children at home. Working on a plan with my parents, and as a nurse practitioner, I will tell you, going back to advanced care planning, I tell my patients, the greatest gift you can give your children is telling them what your wishes are and writing it down and making it clear. It is really tough to make those decisions if you don't know what somebody's wishes are. You harbor a lot of guilt and lots of decision making. There can be some squabbles because family members may feel differently. And in the end, what's important is what your wishes are, what you want when you can't communicate. Phil mentioned Dr. Gloria Anderson, who is, again, nationally known for her work with communities of color. She's a social worker. There's a brochure in your folder that she has a book called What Y'all Gonna Do With Me? It's a spiritual book about advanced care planning. We are able to bring her, again, to Memphis, to do some work with Phil and talk about some of those hard things. The other resource that we have is a program called Alter, which we may have. Are you able to play the short video on Alter? It's just a minute or two, but it's from Dr. Farron Epps, who's from Emory University, and she's gone. She has several states with multiple churches where she goes and talks about taking care of people with dementia in your congregation, but also making worship dementia friendly. So again, we erase that stigma and people are comfortable in coming because people need to get out when they can. maybe looking at a respite or something like that. But anyway, this is very short, and I'll let it play, and then we'll wrap up we'll talk for a little bit.
First memories that come to mind attending church is being at church every day of the week with my grandmother. And that's just how it was. I'm Dr. Fayron Epps, program lead for Alter, also an assistant professor at Emory University. Throughout my work doing research in the community, specifically with the African American community, while I was out there spreading dementia awareness, I came to realize that a lot of people didn't know that this existed in the African American community. And speaking with my bishop and other pastors, they were unaware of any of the statistics. They was unaware of what dementia was.
And what Alter has done for me is given me a clear understanding that this is not a horrible disease, but this is something that happens to people, and it can happen at any age. And I didn't understand. Clear understanding that this is not a horrible disease, but this is something that happens to people, and it can happen at any age. And I didn't understand that before coming into this knowledge and understanding, becoming connected with Alter. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's what fueled me to start this initiative.
Think of a program that is connecting the dots for people living with dementia, their caregivers, and their spirituality. What I see as the major benefits of the Alter program would be the ability to connect people to education, to connect people to worship, and to connect people to support.
With someone with dementia, someone who's dealing with a health struggle, it takes on a different dimension. If the caregiver is having problems, if they're feeling depressed, we should be that space where they can still come, that God is always there.
Just because a person has dementia does not mean they don't want to come to church. It keeps me whole. It keeps me whole, and it gives me a strength that sometimes I need.
The Alter program has really helped me to educate not only myself, but also the members of our church. They're still a human being as we are, and they're still alive and kicking, and we should be open our arms to them and help them out in their older years, because one day we too are going to get there.
I see Alter as that gap filler, and that basically that one-stop shop that some of these older aging churches need to bridge the gap with resources and bridge the gap with generations, so those younger generations know how to serve the elders in their church.
You need to have this. This is a necessity, because you need to be able to cater to all aspects of your church.
We don't know who God is going to send to our churches. We have no idea. But we've got to be ready for everyone that He sends.
Alter has been so good for me as a resource. Sometimes they don't trust the medical community, but they will trust what the faith-based community has, what we have as a church. They'll trust what we say. They'll trust the pastor.